Today's video is an update on my experiments regarding pressure control in your Pinter 3. I will be discussing some of the community feedback on my previous videos concerning this topic, and we will be talking a little bit more about foamy pours, flat beer, and your tap not pouring when you're halfway into a brew. At the end of the video, I will be introducing you to my Pinter CO₂ Recharger version 2.0. In my previous video about foam control, I discussed the idea of fermentation in your Pinter 3 on number 1. This kept the PSI, the pressure inside the pinter, to about 24, 25, and it significantly reduced the foaming at the tap when you came to pour your beer. The caveat of taking this approach is, of course, reducing the CO2 early on into fermentation for your brew in your pinter. Later on, it accentuated the possibility of other problems with your tap not pouring or your beer going flat with the CO2 running out before you get to the end of your beer. At the time, I'd done numerous tests on number 1 fermentation on Pinter brews, and for the most part it was very successful. The foamy pour was definitely reduced. You'll see that I'd done Golden Grove, which was a prolific foamer. Fermentation on number 1, it poured really nice, so that was great. Now at the time I had numerous brews go through the pinter on number 1 with successful results, and I didn't need to use my CO2 recharger to recharge the pinter before I got to the end of the beer, and that was great. And I was wondering how long that success could go on. Of course, my idea was that I was hoping to come up with a resolution for foamy pouring beer that every pinter owner could use, whether they had this equipment or not. Now the truth is that has not proved to be reliable enough that you could risk that, and I'll tell you why. The first bit of community feedback I got, which was very valid, is the question: can we trust that this pinter, if you like, this pressure regulator, can we trust its accuracy across the board of all the pinters that are owned? You know, there's many thousands of pinters out there. Does number 1 represent the same PSI on each pinter? And the honest answer to that is no. We absolutely cannot trust the accuracy of this pressure valve in the Pinter 3. It's only plastic, it's spring loaded, it's not high quality, it's not great quality. There's no meter on it, so we can't read the pressure unless you've got this where you can keep plugging it in and checking the pressure. So it's not really something that can be relied upon. Having had a number of successful brews in the pinter, fermenting on number 1, I had high hopes that I was onto something. But after that, what kind of gave me some concern was when I put through an all grain brew, one in particular, whatever it was, I cannot remember. The beer itself, even from the very beginning, it hadn't just reduced the foam at the pour. The beer was immediately undercarbonated. It needed CO2 charging straight away. Now, as I've said before, with all my experiments, I've got this safety net here to back me up, and I can recharge at will. So I've not got any concerns. But if you haven't got this is a very dangerous game, trying different pressure regulations on your pinter valve, because if you fall short and you end up undercarbonated, or you run out of CO2, whether it comes to later on in the brew or your beer goes flat, if you haven't got this and you can't actually charge the CO2, then you're just wasting your money because you're ruining your beer. So I can afford to do these experiments because when they go wrong, I can recharge them. So this was an all grain brew, and I thought, I wonder, is that a one-off? It's undercarbonated. When it came out of conditioning, straight away I had to charge it up, leave it for 24 hours, put the carbonation in it, and the beer went on to be fine. But then on another Pinter brew, put it on number 1, same thing. Not only was it reducing the carbonation of the actual foamy pour, but the carbonation itself was significantly reduced, so much that it needed to be charged straight away. You know, the beer was on the side of being too flat. So this was ringing alarm bells, and of course, community feedback. Some people did choose to experiment. Number one, number two, obviously people tried different variations on the pressure valve. Some people had great success. They said it worked out for me really well. It reduced foaming at the tap, and we're happy with the results. Some people, it was undercarbonated, and again, if they didn't have this, they're not going to be able to recharge it. So like I say, it's a dangerous game to do these experiments unless you've got the recharger. So the question in my mind then is it variation across my pinters? I've got 4 pinters. Is it a variation across temperatures? You know, we've gone through weather that's been really hot at times, against sort of like colder weather. When it's hot and the actual fermentation is more vigorous, it's producing more CO2. There's lots of things that, of course, can influence this. Or is it just a valve, you know, differing across my pinters? And we really just cannot trust fermenting on number one because we don't know the actual pressure for sure that we're going to get, or the different beer styles. We don't know how they're going to react to that pressure. So it might give us inadvertently a poor result. So it was very inconclusive. And I would say that in summary, for all this feedback and the experiments I've had, I would say for sure that if you haven't got an adapter like this where you can recharge your pinter with CO2, then you really have no option but to ferment everything on number 5 and trap as much CO2 as possible as you can in the vessel to give you a fighting chance to make sure that the beer is fully carbonated, and hope that it will last and that your tap will keep pouring and that your beer won't go flat. Now, one thing I would point out is if you've got this sort of recharger kit already and you've got the adapter here with the ball lock adapter on top, then of course you could still experiment with fermentation pressures, because you could just buy a proper spunning valve which is adjustable, and of course you could pop this on and now you could actually monitor the exact pressure because you've got the actual reference point, so you can decide what pressure you want to run the vessel on and you can monitor it all the way through. Of course, with the pinter, we just got numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It tells us nothing about what's going on inside the vessel. So if you've already got this kind of setup, you've already invested in this and created this, you know, you can get yourself a proper spunning valve and you could control carbonation really accurately. And let's say, for example, you were doing a stout, you could reduce the carbonation by monitoring the spunning valve and setting the spunning valve accurately to reduce carbonation to whatever your desired result was. Same goes for a bitter. If you were doing a best bitter, you wouldn't want it as carbonated as an IPA. So you could control that accurately. You could use the spunning valve to reduce that. And to do that, you would just put this valve on number 5 on the maximum, which would be a much higher pressure point than the spunning valve. And you would probably run this between 15 and 20 psi, or you would experiment to get the result that you were looking for. But in the meantime, and in the lack of this, if you haven't got this, it really is going to be safer if you just stick with number 5 on this dial and capture as much CO2 as you can in the vessel. Another bit of community feedback on this subject is a few pinter users suggest that how they manage this is they just leave it on number 5, create as much CO2 capture inside the vessel as possible, as recommended by Pinter. And if they have a particularly foamy pour that's really problematic and they're just getting a glass of foam, then they actually use this dial, turn it to the off position and just flash it to off and vent enough CO2 to reduce that initial pressure to give them a better pour. Now, that is not a bad idea at all. It's definitely worth trying, but you'll notice here that anything we do to try and alleviate the problem of a foamy pour involves reducing CO2. And this contradicts the two bigger problems, which are your tap not pouring later on after conditioning, when you poured a couple of pints and your tap stops pouring completely, that lack of CO2 is accentuated by anything that we do at this stage to reduce CO2. And the other one, which is another big problem, is the beer actually running out of carbonation and going flat before you've finished drinking it. So it's a double-edged sword here. An idea that we try and use to resolve one issue actually compounds and accentuates the other issues. So this idea of venting some gas, leave it on number 5, get as much CO2 as you can, vent the gas if you need to. It sounds good in theory, but from my perspective, you don't know how much gas you're venting, you're reducing the CO2, and you're likely setting yourself up for a problem down the line. The problem of not being able to pour beer from your tap when the CO2 runs low is not one that I think we are going to find a successful resolution without some form providing us with the ability to charge this vessel with CO2. You know, I have tried various ideas, and the truth is that it is a weakness of the Pinter 3 not being able to charge it with CO2. I honestly believe that this sort of device is absolutely paramount to long-term success of brewing in your Pinter 3. I know that there are 3D versions of these popping up now. Historically, there has been in the past. Some may be successful to a degree, some not so much. But you might see 3D versions, 3D printed versions of these that you can screw in and put ball lock adapters on and the like. I do think that these hopper bottles are actually quite good. They're very durable, very strong. They're good for making adaptations, but of course, a lot of people don't like bodging this in the top. And the big issue with this is that it's very difficult to get a nut on the back. I have actually had feedback from somebody in the community that did take the time to grind the nut down sufficiently so that they could pop it inside there and actually screw the ball lock adapter into the nut and screw it in tight. Now that would make this much safer. You know, I've mentioned this in the past. This has been basically drilled, screwed in, and it's just been stuck with a real high strength adhesive. Now it's super strong. I mean, honestly, I don't think I could break that off there, pull it off there if I tried. I really couldn't. And it's been plodding along and serving me well, you know, for a long time. So it does seem adequate, but I can totally understand why people are reluctant to get involved in making these adaptations themselves, because they would think there might be a safety issue. It's not made to measure. But that's something that we'll discuss in a little bit more detail with the version 2.0. One thing I would point out is I've got an overwhelming feedback from the community that what they want with the Pinter is simplicity. They want it as simplistic as possible. They do not want complication. They don't want high-tech ideas. They want it sweet and simple. That's why the vast majority of Pinter users got into brewing with the Pinter, because it's such a simple concept, and that's what they want. And that's why I got to thinking for a version 2.0 of this type of recharging, CO2 recharging ability, to try and find a halfway house between providing that, but still giving them the simplicity of being able to do it without any real hassle, something that is easy to make, inexpensive, and safe to use. So that's the version 2.0, which of course I'll just briefly talk about further later on. Now, so we've just covered when you pull the tap, it stops pouring. There's not much you can do. If you can't recharge it with CO2, then you're kind of stuck. Now, one thing that you are no doubt aware of, I'm pretty sure everybody watching this video will already be aware of, the idea of opening up the valve. If you open up the valve from number 5 to off and let the air in, then the tap will be able to pour, because the vacuum inside there will be released, it will be depressurized, and now you would just be using gravity to pour the beer. The risk associated with that, which a lot of people are aware of and they will mention, is letting air in, of course, lets oxygen in, and there's the risk that your beer will now very quickly be oxidized and it will just taste flat and off anyway. So you'll spoil your beer. But there is another issue, and this is something that I don't see commonly discussed, and that is when you have a pressurized vessel like this, the pressure drives the beer out of the tap, and it will do so right until nearly all the beer is gone. So the actual waste, which will just consist of the real worst of the sediment, which you wouldn't want through the tap anyway. That's the whole design of the tap, being slightly raised to hold a little bit back so the real worst of the sediment doesn't come out. A pressurized vessel will disperse virtually all of your beer successfully and leave just a small remnant behind. But if you get to the point where you can't pour your tap, and you open that valve and depressurize this vessel, and you flash it to the off position, let air in, pour your beer using gravity now, not pressure, and then turn that back to 5. Well, once you've let the pressure out, it was already low, it will never repressurize now, because you've let any pressure that you had in there, which wasn't enough to even pour a beer anyway, but whatever was in there, you've let out now and it's gone. So this tap now is running on gravity. Now gravity, look at this tap, the height of this tap, which is here. Gravity, once you start emptying this vessel with gravity, once you say your beer was half full, once you start emptying the vessel, as soon as gravity hits the point, the actual opening of this tap down here, the tap will stop pouring. At which point you'll still have considerably more beer in the vessel. Now, of course, what you might find is that if you empty your vessel using gravity, there might still be a pint of beer left in there or more that pressure would have driven out through the tap, but gravity will not. And even if you tip the vessel forward, if you look at this tap here, imagine these taps are long, so that the actual opening of the tap, it goes in here and it's back here. So if you tip this forward, then a lot of the beer will run past the opening of the tap, which will be deeper in here. So tipping it forward, it's not like it's going to be that effective. If that was just a circle, a hole, an opening, tipping it forward would pour it out the hole. But when you tip this forward, you've got to remember the design of this tap. You've seen yourself that they go back about that far, and so that's going to be back here. So tipping it forward, it's all going to rush past the opening of the tap. You're not going to get much more beer out of there anyway. So at that point, you're tipping it, you're tapping it, you're mixing all the sediment in with your beer, and in the end, you're going to have to open up the lid, pour it out, and you're just going to have a mess. You're going to have beer, sediment, all mixed up, and there's probably going to be a pint or more left using gravity to empty this vessel, because you've not used pressure to drive the beer out. Now, this one itself is actually, I've just finished this beer. This was the Adnams Ghost Ship that I reviewed last week. Of course, this is done. This is done and dusted. It's drank. Now, I just wanted to show you that this is on number 5. It's been on number 5. I kept this one on number 5. I just stuck to bog standard results. Didn't do any experiment with it. It's been on number 5. It was fermented on number 5, conditioned on 5, poured it on 5. No, that's it. No issues. Now, I just want to show you that there will be some pressure still left in this. You'll no doubt hear it. So you can see that I'm going to let this pressure, out to depressurize the vessel. You can see here that You know, there's a little bit of beer in there. It's got a little bit more out. I mean, to be honest, you know, I could drink that. It's sufficient to drink. But that's as much as you're going to get now. Your drinkable beer is now gone. And you can see now that the vessel is empty. So that, you know, I could, that is, you know, that is drinkable beer. It's just, it's very nice drinkable beer as well. It's just what was left. You know, that's just the final amount. But you can see there that I'm not really practically going to get any more out of the vessel than that. Just so I don't waste it. So, the purpose of what I'm trying to show you here is, I'm just going to open the valve and quickly depressurize the rest of the system. There you go. I did recharge this one partway through, so you can hear how well charged it is. It started to get a little bit flat, so of course about 3/4 of the way through, I popped it out, recharged it. But the purpose of what I'm trying to demonstrate here is how much waste you should have. Let's hope this can open. How much waste you should have at the end of a brew when you finish your beer. Because I've seen numerous people pouring out pints of the stuff. And the primary reason for this is when you open that valve and depressurize the system, gravity cannot enter this vessel of beer. Not the same way that pressure can. Pressure drives the beer up and through that tap. So I'm hoping, without spilling too much all over the sideboard here, there you go. That's all the dregs. That's undrinkable beer. There's probably about 250 millilitres there. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if the pinter functions properly and it's pressurised to the very end, you will have half a glass of waste. Just over half a glass. That's what you should be looking at, around that every time. If you open that valve and you're trying to use gravity to pour your beer towards the end, because it's run out of pressure, you're going to find that, honestly, I've seen guys that have had a pint, nearly 2 pints of waste, and they're thinking, oh, that's how much waste you have left. That's not how much waste that should be left at all. Pressure fermentation should be pressurized to drive the beer, just like it would be from a keg. The keg should be pressurized at all times until it's empty. And if you depressurize it, you're not going to end up with 3/4 of a glass of waste. You're going to be wasting maybe pints. Times that by all your brews. You know, you're throwing beer away. I've even seen guys in the pinter community now that they're having to open the valve, use gravity to pour it, and there's so much beer left inside the vessel that they're cracking the pinter, putting it on into bottles, putting carbonation drops in it, and actually putting it through a secondary fermentation. That's how much beer is left after they've finished pouring. You know, now all of this is wrong. You know, it's opening that valve really is fatal. You know, and that brings us back, of course, to the big issue. That's what we're discussing here. That's what we're talking about. If you cannot recharge your pinter and use it as it was intended to use, as a pressure fermentation device is supposed to operate, then you're faced with an abundance of headaches. You know, this not being able to pour this flat beer, you know, the community feedback is vast on this. I mean, I know there's going to be some guys that say, I've not had a problem. You know, I've been brewing pinter for a while. The first couple of beers are a bit foamy, but then it evens out and it pours to the end, and I've had no issues. If that's the case, you know, then that's great. But one thing I would say is, you know, I've got 4 pinters and I've got 3 on the go all the time. I've been doing that for 12 months straight. You do that and you're going to have this problem. You know, sooner or later, this problem is going to be your problem and you're going to have to deal with it. I've been trying to rack my brains to find a solution to this that I can just put out to the Pinter community and say, look, here's an easy fix. But the truth is there is only one fix for this. There's only one proper fix, and that is the ability to recharge your Pinter with some kind of device with CO2 to allow you to keep your beer carbonated and to allow you to keep your beer in a state where you can easily just pour as many pints as you want. You could pour 10 pints back to back, no problem whatsoever. And you've got this device to support that. It's an essential requirement for successful brewing. So, as Jeremy Clarkson would say, on that bombshell, I better move on to version 2.0. What I have set about to achieve with this is the simplicity, the safety, and the accessibility that is going to make this easier for every Pinter user to use it safely, in the knowledge that nothing is going to go wrong and there's no complexity to it at all. This CO2 recharger that I have come up with is less expensive. It will cost you less than £20 maximum. It's simpler to make. You will need a used hopper bottle. That's still the point of entry to the Pinter. You know, we're never going to escape that the hopping port really is the only accessible place in the Pinter. But all you'll need is a cleaned, washed hopper bottle, and you need to just drill a hole, a suitable hole. So if you can drill a hole in a piece of plastic, you can make this device. It will be both safer, inexpensive, and very effective and easy to use. Now, initially, I had intended to tag the v2.0 device on the end of this video, but to save this video going on too long, I'm going to keep the CO2 Recharger version 2.0 to next week's video. But what I will do is just give you a sneak peek of it. And a lot of you guys, I know you're very intelligent, you're probably cotton on straight away the difference between this and what is previously being used. These ball lock adapters, of course, are traditionally associated with brewing. That's when it comes to brewing and CO2 and gas recharge and the like, you'll think of these. If you're in the brewing scene, this is what you'll be used to dealing with: the ball lock adapters, these these type of connectors, which are very easy. These ball lock connectors, this is what you'll be used to seeing. So this device strays from that well-trodden path, and I'll give you a quick look at the comparison. This is what the version 2.0 CO2 recharger looks like compared to number 1. This is the original device, of course, with the dial on, the pressure dial, and the ball lock connectors. So there you go. That's the sneak peek. This is version 2.0. This is, if you like, the original. With this, there's no dials, there's nothing to worry about. These little devices cannot over pressurize your Pinter. That's the great thing. This CO2 recharger really is specifically, version 2.0 is specifically for the Pinter. You can pop it on in a second, fully recharge the Pinter. You've not got any dials to be concerned about. You've not got any issues. You pop it on, flip the switch, recharge, turn the switch off, pop it off, done. That's it. It's simple as possible. If you can drill a hole, you can make it. I will endeavor to get my full video out for next week, the Pinter 3 CO2 Recharger version 2.0. With that, I will include a step-by-step instruction on how to make it, which is incredibly simple, and I will leave all the links in next week's video of the parts that you need to purchase, of which there is only 2. It couldn't be easier. So there you go, that is it for today. That is the conclusion of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.